Dale Cooper says in this scene, and he says, "I don't like birds."
One take, one take, one take, one take.
Greetings from Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today, if you don't mind, I'd like to continue on with our discussion of the episodes contained within this landmark series known as Twin Peaks. Today, I'd like to focus on episode 6 of season 1. And so, like with the previous discussions, I'd like to focus on everything up to and including episode 6 today. So the episode that is the topic of the discussion of the video. So I'll try my best to avoid going into too much specifics beyond episode 6. I've seen the series a number of times, and I know maybe a number of you, my dear friends, have already seen the series. You maybe know where the show is going, but for purposes of this discussion series, I'd like to go episode by episode. It has a kind of fun journey aspect to it, I suppose. So, also I should say that I'm not holding myself out to be in any way an expert when it comes to Twin Peaks. So I'm going to get a lot of the details wrong. I already have gotten a number of the details wrong already, but so I apologize in advance for that. But I am coming at this as a fan. And as I say, I've seen this many times, and so I'll see it many more times before the day is done, in a manner of speaking. So with that being said, let us begin with episode 6. And wow, what a beginning. Because if you recall, at the end of the previous episode, we had a type of cliffhanger. And the cliffhanger was Audrey in the hotel room of Dale Cooper. And we should point out, too, that a little bit later in this particular episode, we understand that the number of the hotel room, because we have a shot of Audrey outside of the door slipping a note under Dale Cooper's hotel room door. The number of the hotel room that Dale Cooper is staying in is room 315. So that's an interesting number. I think it might be very interesting, and it might continue to be an interesting number going forward. Let me put it that way. So anyway, hotel room number 315, and this is where, of course, the episode starts, because we have Audrey in the bed, and it is a very dramatic situation. But we also have Dale Cooper very calmly and very in a very collected manner. He is very gently, essentially rejecting Audrey's advances, and he's putting her in the friend zone, in a manner of speaking. So he says, he regards her as a friend. So it's a very interesting dynamic, because one could probably say that maybe at the outset of the series, in the pilot and in the first episode or so, there might have been certain shots of Dale Cooper looking at Audrey, or maybe some dialogue exchange between the two of them, could have suggested that there might have been some romantic interest in the air, mutually speaking. But be that as it may, however one might interpret those early moments, now we have a type of acknowledgement from Dale Cooper that, at least in terms of his outward appearance and his words and his manner and his mannerisms, he does not want to go down this particular, say, relationship dynamic with Audrey. But on the contrary, he wants to go the friend zone aspect. And so Audrey seems to be taking this in a very interesting way. There's a shot of Audrey taking a breath. And so that's maybe suggestive of the fact that she still has deep feelings for Dale Cooper. And indeed, we get a sense of this too, because Audrey, throughout this episode, we see her being quite manipulative in terms of the way in which she has already gotten the place at the perfume counter at Horn's department store through her interaction with Emery Battis. And also, we see her quite manipulative in the way that she's able to go into his office, and there's the guy in front, and she says, "Oh, there was a bus accident or something." He just casually walks away, and she's able to go into Mr. Battis's office and go into the closet there with a cigarette and everything like that. So, but that's where she's then eavesdropping on Emery Battis and Jenny in their conversation in the office with a little unicorn, or as Jenny says, horned horse. And a little bit later when she's talking to Audrey at the perfume counter. And also there is this idea of One-Eye Jacks and the perfume counter, One-Eye Jacks, and what is it, Black Rose, and the like. So incidentally too, before I move on to more discussions about Audrey, we should point out too that Black Rose is a very interesting phrase, and it's reminding me of how there is already up to, or leading up to, and including this particular episode, including this phrase, Black Rose, there seems to be this type of reference to colors. So we've seen, for example, the red curtains or the red drapes from Cooper's dream. And then we also saw how Cooper was able to connect that with the cabin that they find, and the red curtains. Also, we see red curtains in a number of places. Blackie's office. We also see red curtains in the Invitation to Love, and the like. And so red is a very significant color, and now we have the mentioning of black. So let us see going forward if there are any other colors that are mentioned throughout the series Twin Peaks, and if so, what is the significance, of those colors that are being mentioned. And also here we have the connection between black and rose. And so the rose, we assume being maybe the flower, or reference to the flower. So let's see if there are any associations that are made between, say, flowers, or wildlife, or woods or trees or plants, and colors. So that might be an interesting thing going forward. But in any event, yes, this is mentioned in the Emery Battis discussion with Jenny, and the unicorn. Incidentally, too, I should point out that, just as a personal note, I always was struck by the name Battis because it reminded me of the name Roy Batty, for those of you who know Blade Runner. And also for those of you who know Blade Runner, there's a little interesting thing about unicorns. And so this scene always reminded me of Blade Runner, in a manner of speaking. It's a very interesting. But anyway. So yes, so this is going back to seeing how Audrey is able to essentially go into any situation and really kind of take control. We even see this when she's talking with Blackie a little bit later, One-Eye Jacks, when I'm not, as Hester Prynne. And Blackie knows her Scarlet Letter very well, so she's able to. There's also reference to her dog, old Amos. But yes, but we also see that Hester Prynne, or Audrey Horne, is able to still take advantage of the situation. How? By the very famous cherry stem scene, being able to tie the knot in her mouth. And so I've never been able to do that myself. And so I think, I'm not sure if I put it so much on my bucket list of things that I want to try before I die, but it would certainly be something that would be really cool to master if I would be able to do that, be able to tie a knot in my mouth of a cherry stem. But I should try it one day, but it seems very difficult. I can imagine just how difficult it must be, just the hours of practice, or the days, weeks, months of practice that it would take. But in any event, so this is a very important scene, because we also see how this is the way, or an example of how Audrey's able to win out and get what she wants. However, going back to the whole Audrey and Cooper situation, she seems to be very vulnerable, and she seems to be very emotionally quite almost innocent in a way, whenever she is thinking about or regarding Cooper. And this is also seen where she is trying to get his attention, slipping the note under his door, and a little bit before that trying to get messages to him. But we all know that by this time Cooper is very busy because he's about to go to One-Eye Jack's with the help of the Bookhouse Boys and the like in order to further the investigation on that front. So this is a very interesting dynamic with Audrey Horne. And by the end, we understand that she is now in One-Eye Jack's, which could be quite the dangerous and precarious situation, but we shall see going forward. So that's one aspect. Incidentally, too, we should talk about cherries and the eating of cherries. In this episode, we have a lot of fruit eating. You know, there's something to be said about Twin Peaks and pies and coffee. There is some coffee scenes here, some very famous coffee scenes here in the diner. When Cooper is talking about having, we should have a little present to ourselves every day. It could be just a little thing. Don't plan it. Just go along with it. It could be buying a new shirt. It could be just taking a nap in the office, or it could be having a cup of coffee, or in this case, 2 cups of coffee. So this is a very important scene. So we have coffee drinking, but we don't have a lot of pie eating in this scene, in this episode. Rather, we have a lot of fruit eating or references to fruit eating. And we saw the cherry scene with Audrey, but also we were reminded earlier in the episode of Waldo, the mynah bird, who is now apparently a witness to what happened with Laura Palmer, apparently. And so Waldo might have some very important information as a witness. So we have Waldo as a witness. We also had, for instance, the log, Margaret, from an earlier episode, how the log witnessed something. So we see things in nature that seem to be witnessing aspects of the crime. And so here we have what Waldo witnessed. And so the whole point is to record what it is he says, because the mynah bird is able to mimic or copy what it is that the bird hears. Now, this scene early in the episode is very important. So there's a lot of fruit eating. There's reference to grapes. Doc Hayward is here again. Again, Doc Hayward seems to know everything. He's reading up on mynah birds, so he's then probably not an immediate expert when it comes to mynah birds, but he is still able to recognize that this bird is sort of there's starvation and fatigue. So there is some veterinary skills at play with Doc Hayward. So he is multi-talented when it comes to his life in Twin Peaks. So we'll see how many more talents Doc Hayward has going forward. But he also says something about, he wants apples, because it's a great line. He says, these grapes are right on the edge. So he shows a little bit of disappointment in the grapes. And also there's a very, I would say, quite a shocking line. It's a huge line for me that Dale Cooper says in this scene. And he says, I don't like birds. Dale Cooper says this, I don't like birds, which is shocking. I don't know how you feel about this. When I first saw that and I heard that, I was shocked. So shocked, because there is so much to do with birds. In a previous episode, Dale Cooper was so happy when he saw ducks on the water. This was before they were questioning Leo Johnson. And maybe it's not mentioned by Dale directly, but there's a lot of bird imagery already in Twin Peaks, including and up to this episode. I mean, my goodness, we have a song early on, Nightingale, and owls, of course. Maybe owls will become very, very significant going forward. We've already seen some interesting owl shots, some bird shots. Incidentally, too, I should say there are some great owl scenes in Twin Peaks. Perhaps perhaps for me, it could be some of the greatest owl scenes and imagery ever captured. Perhaps maybe another work that could rival Twin Peaks in that department could be Brian De Palma's Blowout, which is right behind me, by the way, which has been on my mind recently. But in any event, yes, so birds. Dale Cooper says he doesn't like birds, which is shocking to me. Remember, too, that each episode begins with the title sequence, Twin Peaks, right? And how does the title sequence start? It starts with a shot of the bird, right? So you have lots of birds going on here. And so to have Dale Cooper say, I don't like birds, is, for me, a very shocking statement. And it's also another revelation about who he is as a character, as a human being. Very fascinating, I should say. I guess we should also talk about Waldo and the very significant aspect of Waldo and what happens to Waldo. I mentioned briefly Leo Johnson. Of course, the implication is that Leo Johnson assassinates Waldo, just as Waldo's about to give, or Waldo's, we know from the recording, actually provides some key dialogue that is played just after they find the body of Waldo. I love that scene too. I mean, it's a very sad scene with the blood on the donuts and everything, but we also have, there's a little bit of, I think it's like ADR. It's just added dialogue later. Everyone enters into the room, and Sheriff Truman notices, and as Dale Cooper goes to the tape recorder, we hear Andy say, "Poor Waldo." So it's not. Sorry, I'm sorry. I'm really bad with my impersonations. That's my best Andy. Oh, poor Waldo. So it's a great line because it shows Andy's almost humanity when it comes to that, and it has a kind of high tone to it. So it's very Andy-like, right? Chin up, Andy, right? If we recall from a previous episode. What was I saying? Oh, yes. So, yes, Waldo has been assassinated. Again, just a totally random remark for me, but I don't know if anyone knows, or if you're a fan of The Simpsons, the series called The Simpsons. Well, there was an episode from an earlier season. Kent Brockman on the television in The Simpsons is the newscaster there, and he's talking about a squirrel that looks very much like Abraham Lincoln. And then there's a sudden news report where he announces that the Lincoln squirrel has been assassinated. And he says, we'll stay up all night if we have to, or something to that effect. And I think this is the one, if I recall correctly, it's been quite a while, but that's the episode about Bart in the well. There's a hole in my heart, as deep as a well for that poor little boy who's stuck halfway to hell, or something like. I got that line wrong, but anyway, I'm so sorry. I'm just completely going off. But anyway, yes, the assassination of Waldo reminded me a lot of the assassination of the Lincoln squirrel in The Simpsons. But it is a very significant event here because we have another kind of death or murder of a key witness. And but not before we have a little bit of clues that Waldo was able to leave behind with the recording. Leo's mentioned, and hurting me, and so there's a little bit of a sinister aspect to this, and we can imagine, or we begin to imagine, that the horrible nature of this night, the night that Laura died. So we have more of this information. And we also understand that Leo and Jacques Renault seem to be really involved in what happened during this night in February 1989, I should say, which is another key detail here, which you keep in mind. Incidentally, yes, when you look at when Audrey looks at the notebook or little mini memo pad or diary of Mr. Battis, you see names and hearts, and you see dates, or what appear to be dates, and some of the dates, and that's where Audrey sees the name Ronette's name, so that's where the connection is made with the perfume counter and horns and One-Eyed Jacks and Laura Palmer. And then there's a date, there's some dates there, and I think some of the dates in the latter part or the final page mention 90, which is suggesting the year 1990. But this is, I think, often regarded as being a kind of a mistake, an on-screen mistake, because it's generally regarded that this story is taking place in 1989, or I should say, how should I put it? Anyone who, you might get this reference for anyone who knows Twin Peaks going forward, but 1989. All right, sorry about that. I couldn't resist. So we'll talk about that bit later when we talk about the further discussions down the road. But anyway, so yes, it's generally regarded that this story is taking place in 1989, March 1989. So yes, so I don't know if that was meant to be, if that was a mistake, or maybe Mr. Battis is thinking about the future. I'm not sure, but in any event. Yes, what was I saying? So already, yes, Waldo is dead, and a lot's going on with the investigation, but that's not going to stop Cooper and company from, the Bookhouse Boys and the investigation to One-Eyed Jacks. And so we have Sheriff Truman and Hawk Hawk standing by. And you also have Big Ed with that great mustache, Big Ed and the stash. It's really quite an epic mustache. One of the most epic mustaches I've ever seen in any kind of television entertainment, I should say. But yes, so we have and of course Dale Cooper with that great tuxedo going to One Eye Jacks and meeting Blackie. And there's a great double entendre speak. They're supposed to be, what is it, oral surgeons or something, and Fred and Barney. So I don't know. It reminds me. I haven't seen the Flintstones in such a long time, but in anyway, Fred and Barney, and there's this talk about we're rookies here, but you might make the team or something like that. It's still spring training. You might make the team, and I run a garage, and I'm an oral surgeon. Oh, you might need some gum work because I'd really sure like to look under your hood or something. So it's a lot of double entendre speak going on, or I should say, I'm sorry, a Big Ed. I'm not a good Big Ed impersonator, but I'd like to look under your hood or something like that. So anyway, yes, so there's a lot of that going on, and that is because Blackie first says, you look like a cop, so it assuages her suspicions immediately. So. Incidentally, too, we should mention Big Ed's scene earlier in this episode with Nadine, who's eating bonbons and watching Invitation to Love and Chet and Montana. For those of you who know that and know some of the performers in that show within a show, anyone who's fans of the film Nightmare on Elm Street Part 5, The Dream Child, and the character Greta, the actress is Erica Anderson, I believe. And so, anyway, Emerald and Jade. But anyway, what was I saying? Yes, so Big Ed and Nadine. Sorry, Nadine is eating bonbons, and she's very disappointed because apparently she heard some bad news from a patent attorney about the we assume to be the Drape Runners, because we think that she's trying to get a patent on the Drape Runner discovery that she made, the silent Drape Runners. But she apparently got bad news. But Ed says to her, "Don't give up. Don't give up," in that monotone face. Don't give up. Which is, I think, a real show of emotion. So we know that there's a lot of maybe not tension, but it's, where Ed's heart is, but in terms of his relationship with Norma. But here we have some very important kind of revelation about his feeling that he has towards Nadine. So he seems to be very supportive of what's going on. You can find another patent attorney or something like that. So very powerful stuff indeed. Sorry about that. So, where was I? Yes. So, Nadine and Ed, and then Ed and the Bookhouse Boys, and then going to One Eye Jacks with Dale Cooper trying to do some gambling, and Dale Cooper then going to the blackjack table, and then finally meeting up with Jacques Renault. So, what's in store for Dale and Jacques Renault and Big Ed? We shall wait and see. And don't forget, too, at this point in time, Audrey is also at One Eye Jack. So things are beginning to become set up here in terms of what might be some kind of huge climactic event or series of events that could happen at One Eye Jack. So, and of course, the episode ends without any kind of, say, climactic event. So things are being set up, like dominoes being set up, and then maybe we will see them fall in subsequent episodes, but we shall see. Very interesting stuff indeed. So that's the investigation part of it. But we should also remember that there are other aspects of this episode that are very intriguing and very much part of the tableau and milieu of Twin Peaks. So, for example, I mentioned Andy and Lucy. There seems to be this continuing tension between the two of them, particularly, or maybe specifically from Lucy, Officer Andy. But she takes a call, and it seems to be a personal call from the doctor talking about some kind of test results. So we wonder what this means. Maybe there's something to do with her health. I'm not sure. Maybe this might have something to do with the reason why she seems to be somewhat hostile towards Andy recently. But we shall see. But of course, we remain concerned about Lucy and her well-being, and we hope things will turn out okay. We shall see in future episodes. She also, we hear her on the recording, by the way, trying to share a little bit of the orange with Waldo. There seems to be more fruit, right? Oranges, cherries, apples, grapes, and the like. So, okay, so there's Andy and Lucy, that continuing saga. And also continuing sagas or continuing character arcs are explored here, like we have to remember too, another cliffhanger from the previous episode was Shelley shot Leo. And then so we have Bobby visiting the house, and then Shelley expressing what she says. What happens is she's so scared because Leo's. She understands he's still alive and he might come back and want to kill her. And indeed, we see Leo outside with a gun, a rifle, about ready to shoot Bobby. But then he gets wind of the of what's going on with Waldo, and so he goes off just in the nick of time. I guess for Bobby's sake. So we have the furtherance of the relationship between Bobby and Shelley. And Bobby here seems to be very much, again, I've mentioned it before, but he has this nobility. And he really wants to protect Shelley. I don't sense any type of double cross or any undercurrent of maybe duplicitous nature when it comes to his relationship and his attitude towards Shelley. I mean, there are a lot of aspects of Bobby's character that are very suspect and very maybe even unpleasant, but I think there's a real strong sense of almost urgent sincerity when it comes to his feelings towards Shelley. So that has a type of poignancy about it. And we see how he wants to protect her, especially when she is so scared about what might happen to her with Leo. And we actually see Leo wounded with some kind of bandage on the bloodied arm there. But he seems also to be able to shoot a gun. So he's still very dangerous. Leo is one of the villains of this piece, Twin Peaks, at least up to now. So we'll keep an eye on that, what happens with the Leo Johnson character arc and Shelley and then Bobby going forward. Bobby incidentally sees also more action with this. Not only does he show this type of anger towards Leo, he also still has a big grudge against James Hurley. We see at the very end, you see sneaking around, putting some substance into the bike, James's bike. We remember Bobby seems to be very much part of this. You know, he likes to put incriminating evidence in places, right? So the bloodied shirt with Jacques Renault, and then now we have this thing with the bike. So we'll see what happens, what the ramifications are for James, if there are any going forward. Incidentally, too, we have to mention James, the continuing saga of James, this time the trio of James, Donna, and now Madeline, or Maddie. And so we have the discovery of the tapes, because Madeline is now helping the two of them in discovering the secret hiding place of Laura and the What's Up Doc. And these apparently are tapes that Laura made, recordings to Dr. Jacoby. And we also heard this from a previous episode, right, about the recording that she made. And but this is probably a tape that the three of them, Donna, James, and Madeline, have not yet heard. We have heard a little bit as audience members. Perhaps if it's the same tape, we shall find out. But in any event, this brings them to the conclusion that Dr. Jacoby is for them a subject of great interest, and maybe something to do with Laura Palmer's death. And so they want to go find the missing tape, which they think is the final tape recording that Laura made before she died. And they suspect that the tape is somewhere in Dr. Jacoby's house. So they concoct a plan to lure Dr. Jacoby out of his house so that Donna and James can go in and inspect and essentially break in and look around and see if they can find some kind of clues as to what happened to Laura Palmer. And this is where also, as they try to go in, this is where Bobby plants seemingly incriminating evidence in the bike. So this happens at the very end of the episode. And so how do they lure Dr. Jacoby out? They make a tape, a videotape, with Madeline with a wig, going out next to the gazebo, or I can't do a Dr. Jacoby voice, but here, gazebo. So there's this thing about how they make a recording, a videotape recording with today's newspaper, and Madeline with a wig. and she calls him up. What's up, Doc? So she pretends to be Laura. He's, of course, very suspicious about this, but it's also very, very worrisome. And so on the telephone call, she says, go to the door. He goes to the door. He sees a package of an envelope and a videotape. For those of you who know David Lynch works, this is a very interesting kind of echo of what we might see in a later film from David Lynch called Lost Highway. All the scene needed was someone to say, Dick Laurent is dead, and that would have been wow, just the kind of Lost Highway reference to end all references, perhaps. But in any event, yes, the videotape at the door, mysterious videotape that Dr. Jacoby plays, and we see that he sees that it's someone who looks like Laura with a wig. Incidentally, it might be interesting to consider Sheryl Lee and wigs and hairstyles, right? In terms of what we've seen up to now, and maybe what we might see in future episodes. But here we have another very, very memorable scene involving hairstyles and someone who seems to look like Laura Palmer. This is, of course, the bait, so to speak. So Donna and James and Madeline are playing quite a dangerous game here, and we will see if that danger is something that will lead to some real intense and maybe unavoidable risk or not. We should also remember too that when Madeline sneaks out of the house, who do we see in the darkness in the living room? None other than Leland Palmer, sitting there in the dark in quite a sort of an almost ominous and maybe even almost portentous or foreboding type of situation. But there's a little shot of Leland Palmer there. All right, so already so many things are happening here, but we also have to remember other things too are happening in this episode. We have more Hank. There's the Hank, Josie Packard, Ben Horn, Catherine Martell thing that's going on. Wow. Just like, it's just, things are turning at this instant. So already we understood that there was this plan between Ben and Catherine about the mill, and getting back at Josie, but also we understand that there's something going on between Ben and Josie, and we also understand too that this probably has something to do with life insurance or insurance fraud, and it seems like an insurance salesman named Mr. Neff, and I'll get to that momentarily, goes and visits Catherine directly, talking about signing insurance policies, life insurance policies, and the beneficiary is named as Josie Packard. You can see in the documentation, he also mentions Ben Horn. So Catherine Martell realizes that Josie and Ben are in cahoots. And apparently they want to kill Catherine and then claim the insurance proceeds. And we also understand that this has to do with the mill and burning down the mill. So all this intrigue is going on. So double cross, triple cross, quadruple cross, whatever the case may be. So Josie, Ben, Catherine. And also we understand that when Ben is calling Josie, who do we have there next to Josie when she's answering the phone? None other than Hank. Wow. Okay, so the double, triple, quadruple crosses keep on crossing. So yes, we shall see if there's more crossing in future episodes. But already the crossing is quite crossing indeed. I should mention here too, Neff, right? The name Neff. This is a great reference, homage to classic Hollywood cinema, Double Indemnity. So already we should mention that there have been many movie references, and we might see more movie references going forward. So see if you can catch as many movie references as you can. So here's one. There was also one that was mentioned earlier, Donna talking about One-Eyed Jacks. There might have been some other references that we could talk about later in terms of names of people, names of characters that we might have just heard. We haven't necessarily met yet. We might just maybe heard their voices over the intercom, but we shall talk about future movie references, if anything. Also, Blackie mentions Cary Grant when she sees Dale Cooper in One-Eyed Jacks later in the episode. So a lot of movie references going forward, and there probably will be a lot more movie references. So it's a type of movie lover's heaven, Twin Peaks is. So in any event, yes. So what was I saying? Oh yes, so Hank and Catherine and Josie and and Ben and Horn. And also, we have to remember too that Josie earlier in the episode talked to Sheriff Truman, who visited. Just before he talked to Josie, he talked a little bit with Pete. He was mentioning Tim and Tom's taxidermy. So an interesting little detail there. And then Sheriff Truman talks to Josie, and Josie mentions about the motel. Was it Timber Falls Motel? And then she mentions how she was there because of Catherine and Ben, shows him pictures. And then later, when they're about to go to One Eye Jack's, Sheriff Truman says to Dale Cooper, I need your help. There's something wrong with Josie. I love her, and she's in trouble. All right. Yes. Again, I apologize for my very bad Sheriff Truman impersonation, but yes. So there's potential intrigue going on because the depth of the emotion, and that really, yes, Sheriff Truman loves Josie. Probably it's a mutual feeling, but we shall see what that relationship dynamic is and how it develops over the course of time and of course of many episodes. So we shall see. But in any event, Josie, there is something going on between Josie and Ben, and also Josie and Hank. And Ben doesn't know that there's something going on with Hank. At least that's the implication going forward. So there's a lot of betrayal or potential for betrayal in that part of the episode here. Excuse me. Hank, of course, has the continuing relationship with Norma. He seems to be trying to at least show that he is reformed, or he is a good person now. But at the same time, we get these glimpses of a type of dangerous character, or potentially dangerous character, that Hank is. By the way, I love the scene too early in the episode where Cooper and Sheriff Truman come into the diner, and Sheriff Truman has this very hostile attitude towards Hank about Fridays, and he doesn't trust him, and he seems to be very visibly upset with Hank. It's almost like a Western, and the Double R Diner, the diner's like a saloon. And so we have, the sheriff coming in, and we have, quote unquote, one of the bad guys, Hank, and we have the sheriff's ally, and Dale Cooper, and then right. So it seems like a Western as well. So a very interesting setup and location. That's another type of maybe veiled or nuanced link to maybe golden age of cinema. When we remember the great examples of Western and say Hollywood cinema, for example. So a lot of wheels are turning. A lot of things are being set up, but the dominoes have yet to fall. We will see how the dominoes will fall in future episodes. Maybe the next episode, who knows? And we also have to remember too that there is a lot of danger and a lot of the sinister risk in the air. The episode, after all, ends with the gazebo and the night, and Madeline standing there alone, and a POV shot from someone from the woods or bushes or something. So is she in danger? Who knows? I'm not sure. By the way, I have to mention to Sparkwood in 21. That's the place that Madeline, pretending to be Laura, when she calls Dr. Jacoby, says, "Meet me at Sparkwood in 21." We've heard of this place before, Sparkwood in 21. This is the place where, when James is talking about when he last saw Laura, at Sparkwood in 21, that's where she ran off, and he never saw her again alive. Sparkwood in 21 is now again being mentioned here. It might be a significant place in terms of the geography of Twin Peaks and this location and the streets and things like that. Well, we shall see. So let's just keep that in mind as well. Sparkwood in 21. All right, so I think that is that. Maybe I'm missing a number of things, and I apologize. But I think we have talked about most of the things I wanted to talk about with this episode. I mean, there's a lot. Oh, I should say too that I love the David Lynch connections, or the connections to David Lynch films. There's of course, I mentioned a little bit of a potential connection with Lost Highway and the videotape. I also mentioned a little bit of there's a Coke reference that I think is a type of polar opposite to a Coke reference that we saw in Mulholland Drive. Also, I forgot to mention this from an earlier episode, not this episode, but an earlier episode. There's a line when Cooper's eating some pie at the diner. This was before he gets introduced to the Bookhouse Boys, And he says, he's so into the pie, and he says, this must be where pies go. This must be where pies go when they die. And so, where is the place that people and places, or people and things go when they die? Heaven, right? So, in heaven, everything is fine. So anyway, yes, this has been a quick discussion, or maybe not so quick. I apologize. Of episode 6, and we will go into the next episode, episode 7. And as I say, a lot of things, a lot of dominoes, a lot of double 3 dominoes are being set up, and maybe we will see them fall when we get to the next episode. But the setup in this episode 6 is magnificent. Things are being set up in this wonderful, weird, and seductive and mysterious way. In this way that's so, it's the embodiment of why Twin Peaks is so great. Wow, and it makes you want to watch even more. It's like a little present. It's like what Dale Cooper says in the episode. You should always give yourself a little present every day. One present. It could be buying a shirt. It could be giving yourself a nice cup of coffee. Or it could be watching an episode of Twin Peaks every day. That is, I think, a great present that you can give to yourself. So if you don't mind, yes, let us continue to give presents to each other. I will certainly give myself the present of watching more episodes of Twin Peaks in the coming days. So won't you join me? I'd love to see you in the next video. Anyway, my dear friends, thank you so much for joining me. And until we see each other again, thank you and cheers.